Good morning. This is Wednesday, March 1st, the House Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs, and we're starting this morning with three bills related to liquor and lottery issues, and I'm pleased to have Commissioner Wendy Knight with us, so thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. For the record, my name is Wendy Knight. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Liquor and Lottery. So I wanted to chat with you very briefly about the three bills that you have asked me to comment on. H7, you're suggesting the term hard cider instead of cider in Title VII. That makes sense. No issues there. Act 60 is relating to fourth-class licenses. For a reminder, a fourth-class license is issued to manufacturers. It allows them to have a tasting room location, and it allows them to have farmers market permits. So the farmers market permits is covered under the fourth-class license. We have suggested an expansion of the number of farmers market permits that manufacturers can have. Right now in statute, it's 10. I believe in our legislative priorities, the administration had suggested 30 based on conversations we had with the industry. I understand that you have 20 in here. That's fine. From the department's perspective, there's no issue with expanding the number of farmers market permits. There is no public safety issue. Since 2018, we have had a total of 7 violations at fourth-class licenses. None of them have been at farmers market permits. So, at a farmers market, Vermont manufacturers are able to sample their product to, I guess they're called guests at farmers markets, consumers, and then they're able to sell bottles. So it's a really good way for Vermont manufacturers to build brand awareness of their product and have people sample it and then choose to buy the product. The other bill is H778, and this is repealing the sunset of the to-go cocktail and curbside delivery. We submitted a report, the assessment of impact of alcohol beverages for off-premise consumption. That was part of the Act 70. We needed to submit a report. Essentially, it says that there are no public safety implications of that. There were no public safety issues regarding to-go cocktails or curbside pickup. There is a little bit of use. We did a little bit of survey. We had to survey our licensees. We did that in partnership with the Vermont Chamber of Commerce. We saw a little bit of activity, but if it's going to help the bars and restaurants, if it's an additional revenue stream, we see no reason why you couldn't repeal it and allow the to-go cocktails and the curbside pickup to be an indefinite part of the landscape. Any questions?
So I have, I think on cider, we kind of are all aware of that issue, and Representative Donahue came to us, and that one probably won't be a topic of much discussion. Just wanted to make sure that the committee, since so many of us are kind of new to the policy area that you live and breathe every day. So with H60, right now, a Vermont manufacturer, so this is only Vermont manufactured distilled spirits. So it might be, Stowe Bourbon. They want to have a license or a permit to appear at an offsite location and sell bottles there. Is my understanding what does each one of these individual permits allow them to do?
So the fourth class license is only granted to manufacturers. So it's all manufacturers, anyone that's manufacturing a product in Vermont. So you could be a mead maker or a cider maker or a winery or a brewery or a distiller. So if you have a manufacturing license in Vermont, you are allowed to seek a fourth class permit. And the fourth class permit allows you as a manufacturer to essentially have a tasting room where you are able to, sample products, sell the bottles. And so part of the fourth class license, excuse me, includes the farmer's market permits, which can go to a farmer's market and, again, sample your product and sell your unopened bottles. That's what the fourth class license does.
Do the farmers market permits only permit that one appearance, or could you get one of them and it allows you to be there for a season?
Yes. So we allow right now up to 10 permits. You can submit a permit for the Woodstock Farmers Market and it could be dated May 20th through August 20th. That would be one permit. Then you could do one for the Burlington Farmers Market and the Berries Farmers Market and the Middlebury Farmers Market, right? So you can do it for a season, or if you have a different approach to farmers market, you could submit it for, 10 days as opposed to the whole season. The duration is dictated by the manufacturer, but you are permitted to submit one permit for the season per location.
Representative Byer?
Thank you. And so everybody sort of like colloquially refers to them as farmers markets permits, but they can use them for other styles of events, correct? Or is it specific to farmers markets? Like, can you do like craft fairs? Because I've seen other, not exactly farmers markets where vendors are giving samples, or are they operating under this license or a different one?
I would have to know exactly what that event is. It could be a special event. Yeah.
Okay, because I know it gets confusing as we bounce in and out of these different
Correct.
styles of permits.
Yes.
We have special events. We
Right.
have fees. We have
Correct.
existing ones, et cetera, et
Correct.
cetera. I guess since we're doing a little bit of an education for the committee here, because I know we've had conversations about trying to make the overall permit structure a little like
Clear.
comprehensible.
Yes. Yes. So let me see if I can be intelligent and concise about this. We have several different types of permits that are sort of issued on a limited basis, right? And so as you're suggesting, Representative Byron, there's a special event permit that can be submitted by other people besides manufacturers. So the fourth class license is only available to manufacturers, right? For your tasting rooms and your farmers market permits. A special event permit, a chamber of commerce could pull, an arts organization, any kind of establishment can ask for a special event permit that says, we would like to have alcohol at this event. It's limited to 4 days, the way it currently is written. And some of the work that we're trying to do in terms of our technical corrections is clarify when is a festival permit, like a brew fest, or when is there arts and cultural events that aren't primarily for the consumption and tasting of alcohol, but they want to have like a pop-up beer tent, like the not so, what do they call it in Waterbury? Not so 4th of July or almost 4th of July or something like that. So that's a great example. It's not a beer festival because the primary intent isn't to sample and taste beer, but it's to have an art and cultural and a community festival, and they just want to have the ability to have beer. So that's an example of why we're trying to clean up some of this language. And there was confusion at Act 70. It inadvertently limited a use case for us to issue festival permits, right? Because the word festival gets confusing because you have an arts festival, and yet the only path forward for us was the brew festival permit. So we're trying to clear that up. We've submitted language. The department has submitted language as a technical correction to clear that up. We've had a lot of conversations with the community organizers and manufacturers and licensees to correct that. because we don't want to create impediments to people getting licenses, being able to sample and sell alcohol legally and safely at these events. So that's the intention with those technical corrections.
Okay, thank you.
Questions from the committee about any of these three issues while we have the commissioners here?
Issues?
Yeah, so just to recap, we've got H7 cider, H60 expanded number of farmers market permits, H78 repealing the sunset on offsite. Any of those issues are on the table. So Representative Hooper, did you have a question?
The service of cocktails, did I hear you right, into motor vehicles?
It's a to-go cocktail. Yes, it was often offered during COVID, and then as an executive order. And then there was a bill that allowed to-go cocktails and curbside pickup. That sunsetted. And so this bill that you have is to repeal the sunset to allow that indefinitely as part of the landscape.
I have not read that bill, so I speak from total ignorance, but we're talking about driving up to McDonald's equivalent and getting a hot toddy out the window.
So it's not McDonald's. It would be a licensed establishment. So it would be a bar or restaurant in Vermont that has, if you have to order food, the bill requires you have to have food, and that, yes, you can get a to-go, it's called to-go cocktail, but it could be, you can get a bottle of wine to go, you can get, a beer. It's meant for convenience because during COVID, of course, people couldn't go to bars and restaurants. It's also meant as a mechanism to keep bars and restaurants in business, right? Because during COVID, they were shut down. They didn't have the ability, so they had to rely on delivery. So some people like to have a beer or wine or a cocktail with their meal. And so this permitted them to do that. And so as you probably know, or you'll hear certainly from the chamber, that the tourism sector is quite an important economic sector in Vermont. And so post-COVID, we want to make sure that we're still continuing to support them. A lot of them closed down. This just becomes another means for them to sell food and, beverage. I don't know if any of you had the ability to do that. It's a treat because it's expensive. You're buying, just like you would in a restaurant. If you go to a restaurant and you sit down and you order a bottle of wine, the markup is about 100%. So you wouldn't, as a matter of course, be buying your alcohol from a restaurant as a to-go option. It's a convenience that you're getting your burger, that you get the beer. It's certainly cheaper to go to a second class license or retail store, but, you're welcome.
Representative Nugent.
I'm not sure if this is a question for Commissioner, but I just would hope that we have more discussion about that policy because that is a big deal. I think it's a huge change in policy, and so much has happened over the last 2 years. People's habits have changed tremendously at home, and now we're in kind of like a shift back. So I would love to hear some, from some public health folks about these practices, and because I think it's important that this report was done, and there was, 23 licenses that have out of the 1,296 that participated in this option, but if you make it permanent, that could open up a whole bunch of more of that to happen. So just wondering if we're having a discussion further beyond that, or if this is just.
Yeah, so I wasn't planning on voting still today. If there are other perspectives you want to hear from, absolutely. So we're putting these on the table today. I think Representative Barr, if you want to offer some context about how we might arrive at a miscellaneous DLL bill, DLL policy related bill, that might be helpful for the committee.
So I was actually going to first ask the commissioner to talk about when we built this policy in statute, the executive order was very ambiguous. as to sort of packaging criteria
Right.
and things of that nature. The House General Committee, which previously had DLL in its purview, spent a lot of time building in safeguards and different tamper-proof mechanics to how they let these products out the door. The same carding processes still apply, the same compliance standards still apply. And as we move forward in this conversation about whether or not you remove the sunset, which I believe it's July 1, so probably the end of June is there, and is still current practice at the moment. There's conversations about and concerns, absolutely justifiably, about consumption on the road and drunk driving. And what I've pointed out to folks is would you rather have somebody drink 4 margaritas at a restaurant or drive home with 4 margaritas from a restaurant? So that's just sort of an open question I always leave to folks as we have these conversations.
Can you say that again? What's the
Would
question?
you rather have a customer drink 4 margaritas at a restaurant or drive home with their food with 4 margaritas from a restaurant?
And then drink them at home.
So
I would think a good bartender is going to shut somebody down by the second or third.
By the dram.
Especially if they're margaritas that
well,
are.
that's a dram shop question that's currently going on in the judiciary.
You might want to be careful about how expansive you make your hypotheticals, Representative Bynum.
If I could just speak to the compliance data. So I want to be clear that the survey respondents were 23. That's not to say that the universe of all of the licensees, we have thousands of licensees. It's not to say that only 23 participated in a to-go cocktail option. It's only that 23 responded to our survey. So what we also found out from the data is that there were no violations for curbside pickup. There was 1 violation for the to-go cocktails, and it was a 4th class license. It was basically a 4th class licensee, so a manufacturer that had a tasting room that did not offer food with that particular purchase. And we did some education, then they knew they needed to, order food. So that's it. The scope of the public safety issues are obviously nil at this from our data. So from a public safety perspective, there's no reason not to repeal it and allow that.
So Representative Waters Evans, you had your hand up before, and I'm trying not to skip over folks. Did you still have a question?
Thank you. It was not a question. I just wanted to clarify for Representative Hooper. I personally have partaken in this particular executive order. And I'm 48, I'm allowed. It's not like getting a Coke from the drive-thru at McDonald's with a straw and a lid. It comes in like a mason jar. I mean, where the places where I got it from, like a cute jar, or like a little bag with a seal on it or something. It's not like meant to be put in your cup holder, from my understanding generally.
Yeah, they're tamper-resistant seals. There's a label on it. It has to have the serving size and the alcohol, so.
All right, so I've got a lot of hands. Representative Morgan, I think you're next.
Just Commissioner, just to circle back on what you said, public safety wise. So we didn't see any great incidences, levels of people being pulled over. Hey, you're drinking your to-go cocktail and get cited or anything. We didn't see any real levels of that, you're saying, is what I'm interpreting.
Yeah, so I gave you the compliance data that we have from our licensees. The problem I remember then Commissioner Sherling talking about with DUIs is anyone can have to use your example, anyone can have a McDonald's cup with a straw and you have no idea what's in that.
Sure.
So.
But I guess what I'm saying is that they didn't have any real data that they gathered. And I think it's going back, sort of tying into what Representative Nugent was saying, that of like they saw an uptick of when they were doing stops of people drinking these drinks because it wasn't that pervasive or whatever, but we didn't see any.
I would have to check with the Department of Public Safety to see if they were indicating when they had a DUI stop, whether or not there was a to-go. I don't think they were capturing that data. I don't know.
And that's quite, yeah.
Yeah.
Understood. I just
Yeah.
curious based on that, but it doesn't sound like there was any massive uptick as a result.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
There was very little negative public safety implications, which is why the department is sharing that information with you and saying from a public safety perspective and a compliance perspective, we don't see an issue with allowing the to-go cocktails to continue or the curbside pickup.
Good. All right, thank you.
Representative Hango?
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on the process that we went through to determine how these to-go cocktails in House General last year were going to be dispensed and not tampered with. We went through quite an extensive process. Quite a lot of discussion about different types of seals, what sizes, how delivery to the car was going to happen, who would be receiving these cocktails in the car. Was it going to be a, licensed driver over a certain age? We talked about a lot of these issues. So a lot of the concerns were addressed at that time. And I certainly think, just inviting public safety back in to talk about the concerns would be a good idea, just to make sure that by codifying this, we're doing the right thing.
Commissioner, would it be your enforcement division that could best maybe educate the committee if we took a little more testimony on this about the actual mechanics of like, how are people getting ID'd with this type of pickup? What are the requirements? What are they looking for when a licensee is actually, taking advantage of this? Is that something that your team could give us a little more education on? Because most of the committee representatives, Hango, went through that whole process, but most of us weren't there around for that. So that might be helpful.
So the process is no different than if you were going to go into a bar or restaurant and sit down and have, an alcoholic beverage with your meal. You would be carded. And the process is no different when you're going to the establishment and having a takeout order of food and beverage. The process is the same in terms of carding. We expect our licensees to card. There's no difference.
So instead of getting an open container that you're going to consume on site, you have a sealed container of some kind.
Correct.
You're going to.
Right. And the difference, of course, is during COVID, there was that delivery mechanism. No one was going inside bars and restaurants because they were closed. So there was a pickup, all right? And so you could be in your car and they would come out and you'd all be masked and you'd roll down the window for briefly and they would give you your food and then you would quickly roll the window up. That doesn't exist anymore because bars and restaurants are now open. So that piece of it was really just during the executive order. So what's happening now is same thing as if you go to a bar and restaurant, you're planning to sit there and drink there, or you're going to take it out. The same process exists. We expect our licensees to card people.
Representative Nugent.
I think that familiar with the process that DLL went through, and I think they did a tremendous job, and so did the state in terms of like managing that. And it was really well run. What I would love to just have us talk about is like the public health impact. So like from a population level, we have like 300 people who die every year from alcohol in Vermont. And that's way more than the suicide rate. And so I think the impacts of this, which makes it hard to sort of extract and look at it from that level. But, if you can apply like the same idea for the vaccine rollout, like how did we get such a high rate of vaccine partaking in Vermont? We we put it everywhere. We put it in airports. We promoted it everywhere. You have it, taking place in different areas where it's convenient. And so if you apply that to trying to sell more and more and more alcohol, which is kind of like, where the industry comes from, because that's their job, is to just make sure that that's profitable as much as possible. Those impacts on the population also like tend to. So while like one of these things may not have a huge impact in and of itself, when you add it up, the ongoing kind of like eating away at like our, the 3-tiered system, and these other things that are put in place for a good reason, you don't want people grabbing a beer and drinking it at home. It can sort of spiral out of control until the problem is, more urgent, and then it's a crisis. And so like, I think that's what I would like to just, I can talk about that, but I would love to have some folks talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think if you'd like us to take some testimony about how this fits into the context of what the policies that we're adopting affects, the consumption of alcohol and the population health issues, we will schedule some time to hear from folks who that's their area of expertise. So I'm very open to that. I think that's important. Representative Hooper.
I concur, and I'd also kind of like to hear from the Colonel Bingham. I think, Commissioner, you said there was good compliance with liquor issues, but as far as whether there was an uptick in people that were eating hamburgers and drinking beer as they were driving down the road, public safety has not fully reported that to you or to us.
I don't know. So that's a question for public safety.
Yeah.
My point was, I do not know when public safety is pulling someone over for a DUI, whether they are noting what type of alcohol is in the car, or if there is a to-go cocktail beverage. I don't know if they're capturing that metric.
Well, my point of reference is human behavior. When I go and get something to eat, I don't want to drive 20 minutes home and end up with a cold whatever. I pull over and eat it. So now it seems like the incidence, at least, of eating and drinking in your car should have gone up, but who knows if that's actually the case.
You'd have to ask public safety if they're capturing that.
Representative Chase, sorry. I didn't forget your name.
Could you remind me what the public consumption rules are? Like, are people allowed to, I know when they're doing picnics and stuff like that, a lot of people, bring beers out on the boat, or what counts as drinking in public and what the rules are?
I would have to research that and talk to the team and get back to you on that.
Oh, okay.
You're not allowed to drink in your car.
Right.
So we know that. So there's that, right? But I don't know. I'd have to understand, the boating and the picnics and all of that.
Okay.
Other questions from the committee or the commissioner?
If I may, I would just like to clarify that repealing the to-go cocktail and curbside pickup does not impact the 3-tier system. So to address your concern about eroding the 3-tier system, this does not impact the 3-tiered system.
Sure, Representative.
I think when you're changing who can deliver alcohol, or like the direct to consumer situation, it's like, I can see how it wouldn't be direct, but I think it does have an impact on who can sell to who, and how the person gets that drink.
Sure. And this is the same way a person would go into a bar or restaurant and purchase food and or alcohol. This only changes the person is able to go into, they can sit down or they can have takeout. So we know that food takeout exists, right? In certain restaurants, they say, sure, you can take it out. This bill allows them to also take the alcohol out. So the three-tiered system for the committee is the way that the federal government has structured the, manufacturing and the distribution and the consumption of alcohol. So you have the people that are making it, those are the manufacturers, your suppliers. Then you have the distributor, the wholesaler, those are the people that are getting the product out. And then there's the retail locations. So the retail locations are where you can buy it or consume it. And those need to be separate. And that's why the laws allow for, a division of responsibility from the manufacturer, the distributor, and then the retailer, which would be the bars and the restaurants and the stores.
Commissioner, thank you so much for sharing the thoughts on these three bills. So hope you'll stick around and maybe we'll have you back as we discuss these a little further. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Good to see you all.
So our next witness on these issues is Megan Sullivan from the Vermont Chamber. So thanks for being here, Megan.
Thank you. So for the record, Megan Sullivan, Vice President of Government Affairs for the Vermont Chamber of Commerce. This is not a committee we have a lot of history in being in, and I am really excited to be here and get to talk with all of you. But because we haven't been here before, I'll just take a minute before we dive in to sort of introduce myself and introduce the Vermont Chamber and the Vermont Independent Restaurant Group. I have been working in economic development for just shy now of 20 years. And I've spent about half that time working with state economic development and the other half working with now Senator Welch in his district office. So I've been in Vermont doing this for a long time. And the Vermont Chamber, I've been part of this organization for a little over a year now. The Vermont Chamber represents businesses of all sizes in every industry and in every region of the state. We understand what it takes to help businesses grow and thrive, build a strong, vibrant community, and businesses have trusted us to center stewardship of our mission on advancing the Vermont economy. The Vermont Chamber is also has a council that works with us called the Vermont Independent Restaurant Group, or VTIR. And VTIR similarly has membership of restaurants that range from larger hospitality groups that provide jobs to hundreds of Vermonters to small restaurants that may employ 5 to 10 people. And the charge of VTIR is preserving and advancing Vermont's restaurant and bar industry. So appreciate being able to come speak. I prepared to speak on 78, but open to questions on the other bills as well. We are supportive, both the Chamber and VTIR, of repealing the sunset that's currently in place on the sale of alcoholic beverages for off-premises consumption. As noted in the report submitted by DLL, their assessment was that off-premise programs do not result in public safety or compliance issue. As such, we would like to see this permitted permanently without a sunset in place. This is a service that licensees have provided and customers have come to expect. It's not a significant line of business for most licensees, but it is an important one. When you think about the hospitality industry in Vermont, which is about 3.2, the visitor economy is about 3.2 billion in economic impact for the state and makes up about 10% of our workforce. Hospitality is really about the experience that it provides both to Vermonters and to our visitors. And for restaurants, that experience is creating an opportunity for people like me, a mom of two with a busy career, to have a few minutes to unwind and feel sort of a cared for experience. the industry has gone through a challenging time through COVID when there was complete shutdown for an extended period, to the continued impacts of that now seeing the workforce challenges that have plagued the industry. To-go opportunities are an important source of revenue for businesses that have had to cut back on hours and cut back on the amount of customers that they can see in-house because of staffing issues. Looking at the trend of sale in alcoholic beverages for off-premise consumption, consumer demand for the service was growing before the pandemic. A national survey in 2019 indicated that 56% of adults said they would order drinks with their to-go order from a restaurant if it were permitted. The pandemic certainly fit with that trend. And I think, part of the experience that you have in bringing this home is that when you have that great bowl of pasta, being able to have a nice glass of red wine with it, or having that craft cocktail that you don't want to buy the 15 ingredients and get a mixology license to make it home, but be able to have that one cocktail with your dinner at home as part of that experience that the hospitality industry in Vermont is so incredible at creating in their establishments, being able for them to bring those out. It's also, that those drinks tend to be higher margin in a very tight margin industry. And as restaurants have experienced a lot of strain from the economy and the pandemic, providing that opportunity to have a part of their sales that has a higher margin so they can continue to support their staff and provide that opportunity for the community to have a place to go is important. So I'm open to any questions that you have about our stance on this or the industry.
Representative Morgan.
Yep. Thanks, Megan. I think, did I hear you correctly? I think I wrote down 3.2 billion is the total food and beverage industry in Vermont.
That's for the total visitor economy. So that's
Total visitor economy.
for hospitality, for tourism in the state. Broadly.
So it's greater than food and beverage.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
We might be able to
No, I'm
narrow that down just to the industry.
Just about how much of an impact that was. Thank you.
Megan, does the chamber have any data around what the kind of percentage of sales that this ability to have to go alcohol represents from your members?
I don't know if we have any specific data. Anecdotally, it's pretty small right now. And I think that is in part because there is a sunset. Compliance with this, the commissioner talked about what you need in order to sell these beverages, and that's a lot of inventory to have a bag that you seal. And I think industry saw New York City sort of turn it off quickly, and they were left with a lot of inventory that they couldn't use. So it's being used in some establishments, but I think we might see an uptick in restaurants that are able to use this service if they felt that it was a permanent opportunity for them, and the investment in the materials that they would need to ensure compliance.
Commissioner, if you want to come close enough, can be heard and seen on the Zoom, I'm very happy to have you weigh in too, if that's okay, Megan.
I didn't talk about granted, it's quite limited, right? We know that the survey responses were limited, but our survey shows that 78.57% of the respondents said that to-go alcohol beverages only represented between 1% and 5% of their total alcohol sales.
Totally.
So we're talking about the economic impact. So 78%.
Trailed off at the end.
Oh, sorry, 78%. Really? I didn't speak loud enough because that's not something I normally hear. I talk too loud and too fast and walk too loud and too fast. So I will articulate that for you. So 78% of the respondents said that to-go cocktail beverages only represented between 1% and 5% of their total alcohol sales. So it's again, limited sample size, but it's a small percentage of their total alcohol sales.
It sticks in my mind, Commissioner, that in order to be considered for a certain type of license, your food, you can't be basically handing a hot dog out the window. You have to have a certain percentage of your sales to be food related as opposed to alcohol related to be qualified for.
The requirement is that if you are an on-premise, a licensee, so a bar or a restaurant, you need to serve food along with the alcohol. There's no percentage, it just indicates that you need to serve food. And we don't define what that food is. We simply say you must offer food if you're going to sell alcohol on premise.
And in this particular exception, there was no mandate that food be purchased in order to have alcohol to go.
No, that's incorrect.
Huh?
That's incorrect. Your statement is incorrect. So there is a requirement in the bill, Act 70, that allowed to-go cocktails. A food order needed to accompany the to-go cocktail. So you just couldn't go into your favorite restaurant and say, hey, I want to get those 2 margaritas to go without getting the nachos and the burritos. You need to have a food order. Just like when you go into a bar or restaurant, you don't have to order food, but it has to be available. In this situation, you actually needed to place a food order if you were going to place a to-go cocktail or to-go beverage order.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I want a burrito.
Sorry to hone in on that. I just wanted to clarify.
Other questions for Megan about economic impact, what's going on with the industry as it relates to these issues? Megan, anything else you want to add before you leave us?
I don't think so. I think we're all set. Thank you for the opportunity. Great to be here.
Thanks for being here. So committee, want to have a little bit of committee discussion about these bills that are before us as a potential miscellaneous liquor and lottery bill really. And just want to open up the floor. I don't know if Representative Byron, if you want to talk to the kind of the history
The history of the miscellaneous alcohol bill? Yes.
Yeah.
So the miscellaneous alcohol bill is a longstanding practice within conversations around primarily Title VII. It was a vehicle that Chair Stevens used when he was focusing on this subject matter. And so essentially what is done is the committee, creeping up upon crossover, which we're at, discusses a couple of pieces to put in this bill. Because we always know that there are conversations that the Senate's having as well, and it just sort of provides a vehicle for these conversations. And you'll see as we touch on the subject matter, we have bigger components that we're discussing here with like the sunset, but also, very more technical correction-oriented ones like H7 and what the commissioner was talking about with trying to define the array of permits more concisely. So it's really a blend of subject matter. And so the request is to take a peek at these items and put them into a miscellaneous bill that we would hopefully move before crossover. So it's sort of like a living document. We carry these conversations over from year to year, biennium to biennium as well, because the industry and public safety are constantly giving feedback on various pieces.
So what I would love to get a sense of is what do folks have remaining questions on and need to hear some more perspective or get more information? And are these pieces that the committee feels like we should include, and then we'll start in our next iteration If the committee so moves, including these as one bill with multiple sections as a committee proposal, if that's where the committee wants to go. Trying to follow up on our conversation about committee bills yesterday. Get plenty of feedback about what should be in
I
such a bill.
appreciate that very much because Representative Byron reminded me that I have worked on a committee bill and it was the liquor bill, the miscellaneous alcohol bill, which I wasn't thinking of as a committee bill because in some cases it's just technical corrections brought to us by the department. So I think that's what we worked on previously.
And so, yes, as I spoke to before, there's components like that. Then, we take a look at bills on the wall too, and then it's structured into the miscellaneous as the title, just so we can hit a little bit of a broader but defined subject matter.
Representative Waters-Evans?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, as far as H78 is concerned, I totally supportive of repealing the sunset. I think all three of them seem fine to me. I mean, there's nothing to stop me from going to the liquor store and buying a bottle of tequila and opening it and drinking it in the car on the way home. I mean, the thing that would stop me is that that's not the right thing to do, but you know what I mean? So let me clarify for the record, I would not do that because it's unsafe primarily and also it's a lot. But you know what I mean? So like the differentiation between like what kind of container those things come in to me isn't, it's neither here nor there. And also a person could go order their takeout, go sit at the bar, wait for it to be finished and then get it and then go home. So like sort of the vessel for the alcohol and the, whether it's on premises or on the way home doesn't matter to me. And the other two seem logical to me that those would also be fine. So I'm all in on all of them.
Appreciate the concerns that were raised by Representative Nugent. I'd like us to follow up on that.
Yeah, I think they're 100%. We will take some testimony about both the larger public health concerns and population health concerns about the way we sort of do alcohol to not be very technical about it, but then also just the specific, if there are concerns about this specific piece. I'm inclined personally, as a consumer, I think the way Representative Waters-Evans is, I go to the Drake, I order a pretty expensive meal, and my wife happens to love the berry margarita that they make. You can't make that at home. Like, I wouldn't even know what to put in it, right? And so buying that in a sealed mason jar isn't all that different than, buying a beer or something else that's in a sealed container and taking it home for consumption there. But I think the concerns are really valid and we'll take some more testimony on it and have some more discussion before we pass these out for sure. Representative.
What's the dram shop bill that you were talking about?
Remember when we had the folks in about the liquor liability issue? That's this judiciary took that conversation.
Are we going to get that bill?
No, because that seems to be falling more into a judiciary conversation. That's why we take discuss. That's why we're not having discussion on that liquor liability piece. It was deemed to be more jurisdictionally appropriate there.
I don't really have a problem with the first two, and it may be puritanical, but I didn't like the drive-through when we kind of did it for COVID, and I'm in love with it now, although there are legitimate arguments that it's a mild change in behavior. Seems like for the years, decades that we've been talking about don't drink and drive, that's all of a sudden a little bit of a pushback. And I don't know that anybody is saying that you're going to be drinking and driving faith. Probably not, but the exception is always the exception.
Yeah, so I want to be really careful because I think what's lost in the to-go piece is that it really is a sealed container that is to be consumed at home, that's being purchased from an establishment that sells food and also has a license to sell alcohol. And the input, I just want to be really careful when we're talking about this, that I can't imagine the department or any of us would want to do anything to encourage people to consume in the vehicle while they're driving, et cetera. That is totally not what we're talking about. So I think there are some concerns about how is this affecting behavior? Are people doing those illegal behaviors? But I just want to be careful that it's not analogous to going up and getting a cup with a straw in it that's ready for you to drink when you're in the car that's a soda. It's not like that.
Well, unless it has a geotag associated with it that doesn't pop the seal until you're in your driveway, then we are basically just relying on human behavior and compliance.
Representative Byron?
Thank you. I would say that every form of alcohol that's being sold to be transported home falls under that same sort of subjective approach. I would also just sort of say personally for me, as we're talking about this stuff, I'm certainly not doing anything that I would personally believe is eroding any form of public safety or encouraging abusive drinking. I'm a recovering alcoholic with almost 16 years under my belt being off of alcohol. So I understand deeply the dark side. And I would not be doing anything I felt would promote, initiate, or engage abusive behavior.
Representative Nugent?
I think, sorry,
Oh.
I hang up, but thank you.
I just saw you first.
Yeah,
I didn't mean you had your hand up first. Taking notes.
Just wanted to point out that now you can go into any grocery store and buy an individual can of wine that comes with a pull top, or, you know, a convenience store, and you can also buy an individual can of beer. I feel like this is just going to a different location to buy the same exact type of product in a similar serving size. And you're probably paying a lot more for it by going to your local restaurant for a takeout of alcohol to go than you would if you went to your local grocery store, which is actually, some of them are open 24/7, and buy the same product at a much cheaper price. So I see that the report says that the economic impact of allowing this in restaurants and bars probably is not great. There's not a great economic impact, and I can see why, because unless you're going to get a meal somewhere and want to bring a drink home with you for takeout, you'd probably just go to your local convenience store or your grocery store to buy a very similar product. And now we also have mixed in a can cocktails, canned cocktails. So really, I don't see that there's going to be an abuse of this system. If people really wanted large quantities to drink, they would go to the grocery store and buy these. So that's my take on it.
Representative Nugent? Thanks for deferring.
I'm looking forward to hearing more public health discussion, and I just wanted to also add that I do think there is a difference. How big of a difference, I can't say, you know, off the top of my head, but in giving somebody ingredients versus like a pre-made thing. Otherwise, you know, I don't think people would bother to sell it that way if it wasn't making it easier. So like every little thing that we do, I mean, I think there's people get paid a lot of money to figure out how to market these things and make it convenient and easy and fun and exciting and normal. And so it's just like, you know, more and more and more. And that you know, it's the cumulative impact, not necessarily like one thing here or there, that really starts to add up. So that's, appreciate the, you know, intention to have more of that conversation later, but.
One of the questions that I'd like to ask folks who are kind of in the world that you are in professionally and that have the experience specifically in kind of understanding the you know, different prevention and promotion and sort of how that affects consumption and behavior is that this particular thing that we're talking about with age 78, it makes me think about when we talked about tobacco, how the high price is, you know, the high tax, really high tax is designed specifically. It's not really about revenue generation. It's about actually getting people to buy less of the thing. And if you have that kind of sin tax that you're trying to push the behavior down, part of the reason, to Representative Hango's point, that this isn't a huge part of the sales, as we saw in the survey, is that very thing. Like, I would much rather just buy the good food that I like to go from the Drake and not get that really expensive cocktail that my wife really likes and just have something at home, because it would be way cheaper to have a beer or a glass of wine that we purchased at a second, you know, class licensee at a store, you know. And so part of when I think about like the equity issues and the demographics of sort of who is engaging in this behavior and what are the mechanisms that affect the behavior, it would be very unlikely for me to order multiples of those, for instance, just because the price is driving a little bit of the behavior. It's really expensive. So that's another aspect of it that I think gives me a little less heartburn about the potential population, public health, public safety impacts of this particular thing. So sounds like sorry, go ahead.
I value your point, and I think we should be hearing from public safety, public health people, just to ensure that we're getting the full circle before making these decisions. I also agree with Representative Mingo that there's all these different outlets to buy alcohol and drinks that are ready to be consumed right on the spot. And that here we're looking at more specialty drinks. So it's different but the same.
Anything else on this? So we will talk offline a little bit about who we need to have in. I had built some time in to Friday for both committee discussion and some potential testimony. So we can do that then. So we'll either pick this back up on Friday with that additional testimony. If the committee, we'll take a look at a committee bill, and if the committee wants to move quickly on these pieces, great. If we want to push it to the following week, we do have the next week before crossover. So we're not, I don't think we're totally up against the deadline, but we also have a lot of other moving pieces with the other bills that are before us and about to be before us. So the next few legislative days, I do want to use efficiently, but I think we need to make the time to hear the right voices. So feel good about this. Yes, Representative.
So with that, I just wanted to ask you and the committee if it was okay to just put these three components in a draft miscellaneous form. We had something to look at structurally.
Yeah, is everybody okay with us at least moving forward with having, it's Tucker that's the justice, right?
Tucker and Ashley.
Can I get like a show of hands if we're okay looking at a committee bill with these three in it? Okay. Sounds like that's a good next step. So we'll put this all up under a drafting request for Friday and
Email is outgoing.
Do that. So I there's nothing else on liquor and lottery. We're gonna switch gears completely and for a few minutes and then take a break and then continue on with the criminal justice council bill that's before us. So I wanted to spend 10 or 15 minutes here on H-251, which is a bill that is very much related to our criminal justice council work and has been a little bit of a hot potato between me and Representative Lalonde. So I wanted to at least have the committee thinking about this as we talk with the witnesses we're going to see today on the criminal justice council bill. Okay. So H-251, if you want to pull up the bill, I and Representative Lalonde introduced it. And so I want to give you some context.
What was the number again?
It's 251, H-251. So the idea behind this bill is that there are these letters that we've talked about called Brady letters. Is everybody in the committee kind of generally familiar with what a Brady letter is, or would it be helpful if I talk about that a little bit?
I've been curious as to the distinction between Brady and Giglio.
There's not a distinction. There's sort of, I'll have Tim Lueders-Dumont, if we have a sense we want to include this, and I'd like to take a little bit of testimony on it, but I'll have Tim from the Sheriff's and State's Attorneys Association come and give us a lot of information, and also Ben from Ledge Counsel. But there isn't a distinction. There is a distinction in terms of the progeny, but in practice, they're the same thing. They're essentially a prosecutor disclosing to the defense or the court that there's an issue with the investigatory process or the credibility of a law enforcement officer. So these letters are issued by prosecutors. And what we've heard from law enforcement is, and I wanted this to be in the context of what we're talking about when we're thinking about misconduct and what the role of Vermont Criminal Justice Council is in its accountability responsibilities. These letters are issued and sometimes very publicly. And then there is not really a way for an officer to say the prosecutor issued that in error or have their case heard that. So there isn't really due process. It kind of, it's literally a letter, but it ends up being a scarlet letter on officers. And there's also the side of it that concerns me and Representative Lalonde and other folks that have been paying attention to these misconduct issues, especially in regard to some of the sheriff's issues that we've discussed, where these letters are issued and they have fairly serious concerns about the credibility of a law enforcement officer, but there isn't a process to review those concerns and consider whether they're a type of misconduct the way that the Criminal Justice Council does. So kind of on both sides of, sort of clearing up an issue, especially for the credibility and the public perception and the reputation of an officer. There could be the benefit to law enforcement of having some kind of process to deal with these letters. And then on the other side of it, there's accountability and sanction or consequence that the Criminal Justice Council could put on these officers. Now, I got a memo last night from Tim Lueders-Dumont from who works with the Sheriff's and State's Attorneys Association that I think will really want to hear that he thinks there's a better way to do this than this bill. But I wanted to put the idea of what's in this bill on the table for us to think about. So what the bill itself does, I think once we kind of have our head around what these letters are, is that it adds to category B a new line, which, so we've looked at, when we were looking at the relief from abuse order pieces, we've looked at these category A and category B misconduct categories. It adds an H. So this is on the second page of the bill, line 14, that bias, untruthfulness, or other potentially exculpatory and impeachment evidence resulting in the issuance of a Brady or Giglio letter by a prosecutor. So if there's a serious professional misconduct related to bias, untruthfulness, or exculpatory or impeachment evidence, could that be a reason for the Criminal Justice Council to consider the process of suspending or revoking law enforcement certification? Then in section 2, it would add an action that the Criminal Justice Council would be able to do to send a letter. And I think this is what we're going to hear from the state's attorneys folks on, is this idea that we would have Criminal Justice Council actually be able to tell a state's attorney, for instance, no, you can't issue this letter. But so Martin, Representative Lolland, and I put this out as sort of to have both sides, the accountability and the ability to clear an officer of the credibility claims that are inherent in the Brady letter. And then in section 3, it adds the issuance of a Brady letter to those enumerated category B misconducts that we heard Chair Sorrell talk about, that would be ones that they could just act on when they're initially presented. So I just wanted this to be on the committee's radar as we're talking with the Criminal Justice Council today, that I've got this bill on the wall. It might be something if the committee wants to pursue it after hearing from the State's Attorneys Association and other stakeholders. But it got some attention when we first introduced it a couple of weeks ago. And I think it's an open question with some of the law enforcement leaders we're going to hear from later this morning and this afternoon about how do we sort of deal with these Brady letters and what they mean to the public. And we want to have a system that has accountability and due process. And this was the attempt that Representative Lalonde and I had at starting that conversation. So thanks for listening to that little bill presentation.
This is basically creating due process for both sides.
It's an attempt. I mean, I want to be clear that we'll hear from folks that feel like the Brady letter isn't I think it has the effect. I think we all know it has the effect of having the public say, well, if the state's attorney is saying this law enforcement officer is not credible in some way, that's a real issue, right? That's a red flag.
They just continue policing in a lot of cases.
Yeah, but in some cases, it may be totally true that the issue with one investigation that the Brady letter was issued for isn't really a scarlet letter. It might not rise to that level of concern. So I think we need to hear more about what do these Brady letters really mean?
Sure.
What's the, as the attorneys would say, what's the progeny of this whole process? So it came out of, court cases about what is the responsibility for a prosecutor to say, this law enforcement officer to the defense or to the court, there's some kind of issue with them as an affiant, the person presenting evidence in a case. And now it's kind of morphed into this thing where, there are databases of Brady letters that have been issued, and, it undermines our faith in public safety, and it's just kind of hanging out there without any due process. So what to do about it? I think we're going to hear a variety of opinions, but this was our first attempt at kicking off a conversation. I think since we're talking to the Criminal Justice Council and going through all that, wanted to have this particular issue as one of the things we might talk about with them. Yes, Representative Cooper, of course.
Dealing with a couple of different levels of, I guess, ethics here. Do we see this as in any way preventing the state's attorney from disclosing the process. I found this to be an issue. I was subsequently overturned, but I feel a professional obligation to disclose it still, which effectively has the same effect, I think, weight-wise on a jury or whatever.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to ask some questions about like, what does this really mean? What does it mean to the state's attorneys? What does it mean to the law enforcement officers? And then what would it mean if we asked the Criminal Justice Council to take these up or potentially take them up as one of the, they would do a misconduct investigation and think about sanctions against an officer if it rose to that level of seriousness. Yeah, there's a lot, this raises more questions than it answers, I'm putting that out there very openly. So great, well, it's 10:15. We're gonna have witnesses at 10:30. I wanna give the committee a little break so we can reset our minds before we get there. So let's adjourn for now.